Good. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Hudson, and of course to everyone here in person and to those who are joining us online for this latest in our series of discussions and reports on energy security and resilience in Europe. Our focus on these issues is driven by Europe's decades of dependence on Russia and the continuing large flows of money from EU member states to the Kremlin that feeds Putin's war machine and his revanchist policy in Europe and overturning of the European security order. All of this negatively affects U.S. interests. Some Europeans want to work with the United States on changing this. The Center for the Study of Democracy is one. It is also one of them. It is also the most interesting think tank in Bulgaria. If you don't know them, you should. They're the primary authors of an outstanding Kremlin playbook series on Russian malign influence in Europe and elsewhere. And how many are there now? There are 10, I think, altogether. They're really quite worthwhile reading. And they've done many others very interesting studies on energy security, Chinese malign influence in Europe, the information space, and more. My name is Matt Boyse, and I'm a senior fellow here at the Center on Europe and Eurasia, and I'll moderate today's discussion. We are honored to have four outstanding experts on energy and technology. Bulgarian Energy Minister Zhecho Stankov. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
We also have Ruslan Stefanov and Marius Koeppen from CSD. And last but not least is Dr. Robert Atkinson, president of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation here in Washington. Welcome, everyone. First, a couple of housekeeping items. We have box lunches outside. Hope that you'll stay afterwards and eat and network. We'll talk until about 13:45 and save the last 10 to 15 minutes for discussion. Ruslan will briefly introduce his team's work, and then we'll go over to the minister, who will offer his thoughts on the most important energy official in Bulgaria. And then we'll turn to Marius, who, by the way, earlier this year led an outstanding study on reducing Russian influence in Germany. And then turn to Dr. Atkinson, whose foundation is so well known it needs no introduction. But before we start, I'd like to briefly set the table for today's conversation. Europe is in the middle of a shift in its energy security policy that will influence the EU's position in the world for years to come. Russia's weaponization of fossil fuel exports and mounting competition for raw materials and technologies have exposed major vulnerabilities in the EU energy and regulatory space. Over the last 3 years, the EU member states have taken many steps to reduce their dependence on Russian energy, including by deciding to end imports by December 31st, 2027. This positive shift has a transatlantic angle, of course, as the U.S. can play a positive role by supplying products that enable Europe to deny dictatorships the ability to jerk them around. But Russia still supplies around 19% of the gas imported into the EU, which is not that different from a year ago. Last year, member states bought Russian LNG worth about 7 billion euros. With many member states or importing states spending more on Russian hydrocarbons than helping Ukraine defend itself, which is why, or maybe one of the reasons why President Trump last Thursday called on Europe to stop buying Russian oil. And Secretary Rubio and Treasury Secretary Besant have also recently urged the EU to block all purchases of Russian oil and gas. The EU, I think, should act on this because it would demonstrate that it really, really, really understands the problem that it faces and is prepared to put its money where its mouth is. It would also increase pressure on Putin and affect his calculus on Ukraine. Now, while he thinks and insists that nothing will change his calculus, and many minimize the effects that steps like these can have, such EU action would intensify the damage to the energy sector that Ukraine has been inflicting in recent weeks and months. And we can be sure that if the EU does nothing, it will definitely not affect Putin's calculus. So many people think that Hungary and Slovakia are the main obstacles, and of course they are, but France, Belgium, and Spain also buy a lot of Russian LNG, and Russian molecules find their way into other member states as well. Pipeline gas enters the EU via Greece and Bulgaria through the Turk Stream pipeline. LNG enters France at Montoire and Dunkirk, and Belgium through Zeebrugge, which last year received more Russian LNG than any other European terminal and serves as a key hub for Russian gas, especially from the Yamal LNG area. Russian LNG also enters Spain at many ports. Russian oil enters Hungary and Slovakia via the Druzhba pipeline. And so the EU is therefore the largest global buyer of Russian pipeline and LNG gas, even if the trend line has been going down. And this doesn't include the problem of Russian shadow tankers and ship-to-ship transfers in EU waters. After years of watching this, the EU has only recently begun to focus on it, and more action is needed. But unfortunately, importing, refining, and selling and/or consuming Russian energy does make good sense for some actors, and not only in Hungary and Slovakia, but for others as well, and offers Putin continuing opportunities to drive wedges into NATO by dangling economic advantage to before member states. And this needs to stop. Now, Southeast Europe, and Bulgaria in particular, has the potential to be a major gateway for US LNG exports that could, if this opportunity is exploited, fully replace Russian gas by 2027. The Denkov and Petkov governments a couple years ago took major steps. They terminated Russian oil imports and prohibited the Lukoil refinery in Burgas from processing Russian crude. They ended Lukoil's 35-year concession to operate a terminal on the Black Sea, and they imposed a 60% tax on profits from that refinery. The current government is trying to sell that refinery, which is a positive development, and I hope the minister will update us on that. It hasn't, I guess, already, or I'm not sure it's already been sorted out, and I've heard that Kazakh and Qatari and Hungarian firms are interested. But if a major Western oil company is listening, that has to be an interesting proposition. Europe will need a lot more energy to power the AI-driven systems of the future, and windmills and solar farms will not do it. Europe also needs to radically ramp up its production of energy via nuclear and small modular reactors. This is good news. There is good news on this front, and even if the projects and goals will take a long time to complete, and I look forward to hearing from the minister on that. So before we start with Minister Stankov, Ruslan, is there anything we should know?
Well, thanks, Matt. First of all, thanks for hosting us for what I think is now a traditional briefing of the latest CSD product that you could also read this morning in Political Frontline on energy security in Europe. And it shows that we're still not out of the woods. You know, the EU has done, I can assure you, I've seen that, has moved at a tremendous speed. Also thanks to the pressure from the Trump administration. And we've done a lot in terms of energy security, economic security. This has been in the heart. But what our numbers that my colleague Marius is going to just present in a few minutes show is that the affordability pillar, which bears on our competitiveness and, of course, the citizens, the public opinion, the general population concerns are still very high. Which, of course, rogue actors like Russia are going to use. And actually, what we've shown in our series of Kremlin Playbook publications that we've presented also here at the Hudson Institute is that both Russia and China operate as networks. And in Southeast Europe, we're facing this, and we've been facing this challenge for a number of years, I'd say decades, because Russia has been holding a monopoly position on energy supplies across Southeast Europe, all the way to Hungary. And China has been holding a position in rail and road. So we have a sort of an X going all throughout the region, and they've kind of anchored a lot of companies in there. And these are anchors that are very, very heavy. And I'm sure that Minister Stankov can agree with me that for 10 years, Bulgaria has done quite a tremendous progress in finishing up a lot of Russian projects. I have to remind you about the South Stream pipeline, which was supposed to bring 64 BCM to Bulgaria. We would have had this had Bulgaria actually gone with the then mainstream European strategy in getting Russian oil and gas into the EU. But this has cost a lot. You know, remember the not happening of the shale gas revolution? Well, that was partly because of the South Stream, because the Russians are paying heavily to influence Europeans' decisions on that. And one of the things that we've seen as a gap in these 5 years that we've seen of a really serious ramp back of European focus on economic security has been the lack of sanctions enforcement capacity. And I think this is where we continue to see kind of this continuing request to the US administration to help us manage this transition where we could have more US LNG into Europe, specifically into Southeast Europe, and more US tech in terms of nuclear, of course, small modular reactors, and get this kind of benefit from the US Energy Dominance Initiative in a way that also eases this competitiveness constraint that the Russians' weaponizing of energy has caused. So in that respect, I certainly, we will continue on our path. You know, CSD has been able to actually help with Mr. Stankov's party push that derogation that you mentioned, you know, and this has been a very uphill battle with Russia and our own government. And there are a lot of people that still support that path forward. We've seen also new people meeting with China and Bulgarian government and so on and so forth. So this is ongoing battle, and I think for that we need a combined U.S.-EU support for the region. We've been able, my colleagues have been able to close the derogation on oil, buying oil for the Czech Republic. We've been able to close derogation for Bulgaria. We haven't been successful in actually getting rid of the Russian gas, which all our neighbors in Southeast Europe enjoy. Actually, Bulgaria has stopped the buying of the state-owned buying of gas, but all the rest keep doing this. So doing the private sector, I think the only viable way forward is sanctioning Russian gas, which will, as we mentioned, this networked approach will always work and trump market economics in a very effective way, which has happened. But I will look forward to working with you in making this smoother transatlantic effort in bringing Southeast Europe onto the path of technological change with US help. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Minister, thank you again for joining us, and we're honored to have you here. So Bulgaria has the potential to be a major positive player in Europe's diversification efforts. Previous governments, their decisions on the Lukoil refinery in particular, show determination to reduce Russia's malign influence. Your government's decision to continue expanding nuclear power with the USAP 1000 technology will open new opportunities for powering AI-driven data centers and industrial growth. Could you elaborate on how your government can phase out Russian gas via the Turk Stream pipeline, and how you plan to scale up nuclear and thus make Bulgaria into a hub for more secure, more affordable, and innovative energy in Europe?
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting this meeting and for the constructive questions. You asked me very important questions. Maybe as good news, between 2021 and 2024, Bulgaria had 8 times in a row elections, which, let's say, our partners has the feeling from political uncertainty. And now with the current government, we have our political program, we have a strong government at the moment. And on the top on the list, some of the projects you already mentioned. On the first line is the AP 1000 investments in Unit 7 and Unit 8. 2 new units next to the existing one, existing 2, Unit 5 and Unit 6, which are from crucial importance on the top of the list on this government. It's very important to mention Bulgaria is fully committed to be the first country in Europe to have AP 1000 reactors operational. Our idea is until mid of next year to have a final investment decision taken by the government and by the parliament. Until end of the year to have also the EPC contract signed. We have a strategic decision of the parliament that construction should happen with the consortium of Westinghouse delivering the AP 1000 technology and Hyundai. In this partnership, we see a big potential until 2034 to have the Unit 7 ready, until 2036 to have Unit 8 ready. But of course, Bulgaria is well known in our southeastern region as a net exporter from energy. And the goal of this government and my goal as a minister is to keep part of the energy on the Bulgarian territory and to use it for additional added value. Here we're speaking for additional investments on Bulgarian territories in data centers and artificial intelligence gigafactories, which will give us really the opportunity for these new investors as a game changer in the region. Of course, if we have enough off-takers next to Unit 17, Unit 8, it will be easy starting thinking about Unit 9 to Unit 10, because that will make the project bankable. And for Unit 7 to Unit 8, we show the commitment from the side of the state for 30% of the capex to be provided from the state budget, even this year, which is very important from the side of our commitment to become a member of the European Eurozone from the 1st of January 2026. We injected additional amount of money into the SPV, which allow us to start also the negotiation with US Exim, with the K-Sure and K-Exim for the additional financing. We choose already Citibank as a lead negotiator, and of course Ernst & Young as a financial consultant, which gonna help us for organizing the additional financing for this project. You mentioned during your introductionary speech that the previous government for Mr. Stankov and Mr. Koeppen shifted out the oil from Russia. The truth is that the guy which just came, Mr. Dobrev, was the person which pushed the Russian oil to be shifted out of the Bulgarian refineries. Always when he introduced the decision of the parliament of shifting out the Russian oil, the Prime Minister Stankov ran with, let's say, the documentation of quitting from the government, because that was their decision. They promoted also the exemption for Russian oil during their government, but this is the person who is personally responsible, who started a special tax in Bulgaria for the Russian oil and helped a lot for shifting the Russian oil. Of course, in the coming back to the nuclear, comparing with the time about 10 years ago, we were dependent 100% from the nuclear fuel coming from Russia. Now, at the moment, together with Mr. Dobrev, maybe a year ago, we visited the facility of Westinghouse in Sweden, where the brand new 43 assemblies were produced and delivered already to Bulgaria, and part of them are already in the core of the reactor. And we can easily say that now we are also fully independent of the delivering nuclear fuel from different suppliers, not from Russia. And of course, with the gas, we have a similar situation. At the moment, Bulgaria is the first country which declined using natural gas from Russia. Of course, we are in a difficult situation because our neighbors are swapping and selling natural gas from Russia on the Bulgarian territory through the gas exchange. They are delivering the same Russian gas which we denied to use, but with 30% higher price. Which is injecting billions of euro into the account of the Russian colleagues, which are using this money for promoting their war against Ukraine. Of course, we are working. The government at the moment is working very hard for constructing a new pipelines, the vertical gas corridor. It's about $300 million project, which is financed by our own. And this project will be ready until third quarter of 2026. That will give us the opportunity to transfer gas from Greece to Bulgarian border with additional 50% increase of capacity. On the Bulgarian-Romanian border, we're going to increase with 100% the capacity up to 10 BCM. Or the whole amount of gas which we can transfer through the LNG terminals in Greece, through the LNG terminals in Turkey, more than 25 BCM, and that is the wide open door to the US LNG to reach not only Bulgaria, but the southeastern part of Europe and even to the heart of Europe. Since I'm minister, we already organized 4 deliveries of 4 cargos from LNG from the Freeport USA to the LNG terminals in Greece and Turkey. But that's a small amount of gas. Now I asked the state-owned company Bulgargas to send letters for all other state-owned companies, and I spoke already with all ministers in the region for finding a solution for common tender for long-term period, which will allow us for from one side, security of supply of the region, from the other side, certainty from the colleagues from the US for their supply to gas, to production of this LNG. And from the long-term basis, I'm sure that we can reach really good prices for this. And something which is also very important for us, at the moment we are investing also a lot into batteries, in the storages and the energy storages, which to allow us, when we're inviting data centers, artificial intelligence gigafactories, really to provide them green gas, which is precondition for them to be part of the energy system and to invest on some territories. And today we had a very fruitful meeting with our colleagues from the State Department and also from the USTDA for helping us with pre-feasibility studies, which let's say, to verify the advantages of Bulgaria for such investors.
Yeah. So yes, on the role of Mr. Dobrev, who's with us today. Yeah, yes, success has many fathers, and so. But yes, very interesting. Could I get you to maybe to comment on also? I mean, the nuclear piece is extremely important because it's clean, but it's way into the future. And so what about sort of so as far as hydrocarbons are concerned, what's happening with Boyse and Lukoil? I mean, because are there opportunities for, so if you've got the Qataris and the Kazakhs and the Hungarians interested, is that deal like anywhere near done, or is there still a role for for whatever, Chevron, if they happen to be watching this, or Exxon, or I don't know, I'm just whatever, Shell or whatever, some any other majors that might actually find that an interesting deal.
The first thing which we organized during this government was to establish a special monitoring board, screening board, which to monitorize such a strategic asset sale in the future. Because of course we have to protect ourselves from if this asset going to be sold to companies outside of Europe, which somehow are connected to Russia or White Russia, which is problem for us. From the side of the information, how far the colleagues by selling this asset, officially in the Ministry of Energy, we are the owner of the golden share in the refinery in Burgas. We didn't receive any official information during the board of directors. Never would discuss that the refinery going to be sold. But of course, that doesn't mean that the mother company didn't take any actions for selling the daughter company without telling them that it's ongoing procedure. We are well prepared if such action is happening to protect the Bulgarian and of course the European rights of screening, 100% screening this sale, and to be sure that no Russian or White Russian company gonna be involved in such sale, and to protect the security of supply of the region, because you know that refinery, which is in Burgas, is the biggest one on the Balkan Peninsula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sort of, yeah, because of the possibility of other investors being part of the whatever the Kazakh project
from the
or
side,
the Qatari or whatever other Hungarian project.
Yeah, from the side of informal communication, which we are receiving from different sectors, on the final stage, the colleagues from Hungary, also the colleagues from Azerbaijan, and some Turkish companies. Right. But the last information we received related with this was, let's say, half year, about 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we'll watch this space. Curious as how that develops.
Maybe just a few words also for the nuclear, because you mentioned that it's a long-term investment. Today I had the opportunity with my colleagues also to speak with the USTDA that SMRs is also something which is important for us. From one side, our government is recognizing AP1000 technology as a strategic technology, and we want to be the first one in Europe having operational. From other side, there are private companies which want also to develop SMRs. Because of the nuclear risk, of course, the state will be also involved. That's why we are planning with Mr. Dobrev in about 2 weeks to visit the GE Hitachi first plot in Ontario where they're planning to construct such SMR. And for us, it's very important with the colleagues from the USTDA also to have the feasibility study, not for the plots, but for the technologies which is possible to be used on Bulgarian territory.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad to hear that Bulgaria is also pursuing this because, I mean, Romania has been in the media now for 4 or 5 years on this, and other Poland as well, and we're hearing this also from the Czech Republic and Slovakia. So this is going to happen at some point. And
yeah. We are most advanced because, for example, you mentioned Poland. The colleagues, we are working very well with them and we're cooperative. But comparing it with them, Bulgaria has 50 years of experience in the nuclear sector. Our citizens, 70% of the Bulgarian citizens, are supporting the nuclear technologies and investing in new power plants. And of course, comparing with the colleagues from Poland, they don't have regulator, they don't have legislation, they don't have experience like us. But of course, we are ready to help any country which wants to be part of our big nuclear family.
Right, you've been doing this for a long time. Turning to Marius. Marius, CSD recently published a comprehensive assessment of European energy security. Could you highlight the most significant policy takeaways for the US, for the EU, and for Southeastern Europe?
Gladly.
You've got some slides here.
I have some slides for that. Yeah, first of all, thank you for hosting us, and thank you for the opportunity to present these results of our recently updated Energy and Climate Security Risk Index, and also the policy recommendations that we can deduct from our findings. So just as a brief overview, our index captures 4 dimensions of energy and climate security, which are the geopolitical, the affordability, the reliability, and the sustainability risks. And policymakers basically face the challenge of striking the right balance between these 4 dimensions, while considering complex trade-offs and also interlinkages between the 4. What we saw in 2022 was that the overall risk in the EU more than tripled as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the resulting energy crisis. But also in 2023, the decisive actions taken by the national states and the European Union helped to decrease the overall risk again by almost 50%. But at the same time, if you look at differences between European member states, we also see that the energy crisis led to a widening gap between the transition leaders and the transition laggards. So most of the countries that experienced the most extreme affordability shocks in 2022 in Europe were like very energy intensive economies, highly dependent on fossil fuel imports, and in particular imports of Russian oil and gas. But interestingly, we also observed that countries that already had alternative gas infrastructure, which is an indicator in the reliability dimension, many of them were able to replace Russian gas with either Norwegian pipeline gas or US LNG. But at the same time, there are also countries that possess extensive gas infrastructure, but were not able or not willing to replace Russian gas. And if we look at the affordability risk, it remained the major risk driver in 2023 and 2024 as well. And it remains a huge challenge for European industrial competitiveness. If we look at the developments in the geopolitical risk dimension, we clearly see the effects of the European sanctions on Russian fossil fuels and the targeted measures taken by national states. So we can see that the security risk associated with oil and gas imports has actually gone down significantly in 2023 and also in 2024. But as you can see, for the 3rd year in a row, the risk associated with raw material imports, like critical raw material imports, increased all across the EU. which is mainly the result of the accelerated energy transition, but also comes as a result of private consumption in Eastern Europe converging with the EU average. And of course, this comes with new geopolitical exposures since China unfortunately controls the markets for most of these critical raw materials. But at the same time, I think there's also some good news since Southeast Europe in particular also has large reserves of critical raw materials like copper, nickel, graphite, gallium. And as part of the EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, one project in Romania and one project in Greece have already been selected as projects of strategic importance for the security of critical raw materials in the European Union. And of course, we shouldn't forget about the planned lithium project in Serbia, which is estimated to be able to cover up to 90% of future EU lithium demand. At the same time, as I already mentioned, the energy price shocks have been one of the biggest drivers of EU inflation and affordability risks in 2022 and 2023. And of course, it's pretty clear that EU competitiveness and especially energy-intensive industries in the EU still haven't recovered from this. So inflation is down, but retail prices for electricity and natural gas remain high. And also, this is reflected in the output of the manufacturing sector in the EU, which has declined for the second time in a row in 2024. So we see that this is still, out of the 4 dimensions of the index, the most critical aspect. Of course, in the long run, the transition to low carbon technologies is expected to lower prices because, for example, we already see that in countries that are able to cover their electricity demand with a combination of nuclear, hydro, and other renewable energy sources, electricity prices tend to be the lowest in the European Union. But of course, building such a low carbon energy system comes with high upfront costs, especially for the modernization and the expansion of the grid. And these are often passed through to consumers, which leads to higher retail electricity prices and therefore higher affordability risks in the short and midterm. Which brings me to some of the recommendations that we basically deducted from the results of our index. And first and foremost, which is, I think, not surprising, the EU should further accelerate and then also finally complete the phase out of Russian gas and oil. And as you already mentioned, as Ruslan mentioned before, Southeast Europe can definitely play a key role in this transition because the index shows us that already Southeast Europe performs very well on gas infrastructure, and with the planned expansions of the gas grid, I mean, this will only improve and enable US LNG to replace the remaining Russian pipeline gas in the region. Secondly, I think it's important to avoid new vulnerabilities in critical raw materials, batteries, and other low carbon technologies. And because of that, the EU should focus further on long-term agreements with friendly nations, but also try to create markets for recycled critical raw materials by, for example, passing design and recycled content requirements, as this would not only de-risk the imports of critical raw materials, but it would also lower the demand for new critical raw material imports. So I think this is also an important point. Further, I think related to what I said before, the modernization expansion of the grids, I think it's it's key to expand the interconnector capacity in the EU so that, for example, when Bulgaria builds its nuclear power plants, more electricity can be exported to its neighboring countries, and all countries can benefit from this electricity supply. But it's also very, very important, with the expansion of renewables, to put a focus on flexibility solutions like energy storage, but also demand response. And I think one lever that European states have here is to introduce time variable electricity pricing and also grid fees to shift consumption of households and businesses to off-peak hours. But of course, the precondition for this is like a large-scale rollout of smart meters, which in many European countries is still severely lacking. Like, for example, in Germany, the EU's biggest economy, less than 1% of households have installed smart meters. So this would be the first step, of course. And finally, I think the European Union, the European Commission should expand technical assistance and administrative capacity building programs, especially for those countries with the highest energy insecurity risk, to help them improve their energy security.
Excellent, excellent. So moving to Dr. Atkinson, so your work focuses on the intersection of technological innovation and public policy. Where do you see the most potential for the US and the EU to collaborate on clean tech and enhance energy security and resilience in Europe?
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm not an energy expert, although we have a ITIF Center for Clean Energy Innovation. Our core belief is clean energy is not ready for prime time. It won't be ready for prime time for a while, and it needs dramatically more innovation. We just released a report on SMRs that was focused on that. I just want to make an overarching comment about how Europe got into this mess, and then I can pivot to sort of where I think there's cooperation. And by the way, when I talk about Europe, I'm sort of doing a Donald Rumsfeld of old Europe. You guys are cool, but old Europe, now we're talking something else. Old Europe, and kind of overall Europe, they really made, I think, two fundamental errors. They tried to impose their will on the world, and it didn't work. And one of them was they drank the Frank Fukuyama Kool-Aid, that we are all going to be allies. We're all friends. Integrated global world, markets of one. Yeah, I don't think Putin read that memo. I don't think Xi read that memo. So if you're in that world, let the Russians make all your gas. I mean, dirty, let's just do it. Oh, that failed miserably. And the second thing they had was they really, really drank the Kool-Aid again on renewable energy, as if renewable energies could power all of Europe. Dream on. A long, long, long way for that to happen. And when you see, for example, the Germans getting rid of their nuclear power plants, you're like, has anybody been prosecuted for that stupid decision? Oh my God, what were you possibly thinking? Get rid of your nuclear power plants, and then a few years later, Putin comes in and like. So the Europeans are, to their credit, they're not stupid, they're waking up to reality. My only point is that reality should have been woken up to a long time ago. I think there's a couple of ways that we can then cooperate. One is, if we wrote this report on SMRs, and one of the things we talked about was big data centers and AI and all, which requires constant power. I mean, you can't like have a data center and go, hey, geez, it's dark out. We're not going to run our data center at night, or a little cloudy for the last few days. So you have to have that. And where do you get that from? Ideally, you'd get it from nuclear, but the reality is that's not going to happen for a while. So you have to get it from natural gas generation turbines. That's the only answer. You run those when you don't have your renewables coming on board. And therefore, one of the areas we could cooperate on is obviously natural gas exports. Problem with natural gas exports, and I'm in the minority here in the US, in Washington, is ultimately it leads to the Dutch disease, which I think everybody knows. You run all your exports on energy, and your value of your currency goes way up, and your manufacturing base goes down. That's what I think is the risk there. I don't think the Trump administration, frankly, cares. I think they're just like any export's as good as any export. But certainly Europe, I don't think, can rely on US exports of natural gas for a significant period of time. I think the biggest area where we should collaborate, and it's not going to solve the problem tomorrow, which is, the national security Russia challenge. I get that. But I really think it's on SMRs. And I think in two main areas. One is there's still a lot of R&D to be done, and it's expensive, and there's roles for government in certain parts of that R&D ecosystem. And so I think we need a joint SMR R&D strategy between Brussels and the US, in Washington. Identify key parts of that, specialize in certain areas, collaborate, share results, pass them on to our European and American SMR producers. I think that would be very, very valuable. The second thing SMRs need, and this is the real promise of SMRs, is SMRs are different than large nuclear, where large nuclear is like building a stick-built house. You build it once, and you got no economies of scale. SMRs, in theory, should be able to be factory built and then shipped. And so in theory, you have economies of scale coming from SMRs. And so if we can create an integrated market where ours can go to your market, yours can go to our market, we can end up with, and influence third-party markets against the Chinese, we can end up with more scale, which I think would spur SMR price reductions, which then spurs SMR adoption. And the last area would be to align regulatory regimes. We're woefully behind with our Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They asked me once to come in there for a roundtable on how they could be more innovative, and it was like, man, that's like asking a garbage dump how they can be cleaner. It was like, being a little facetious here, but their whole orientation is risk aversion, and I get that. You don't want a nuclear power plant blowing up. But we've got to take a few more risks when it comes to these technologies, particularly SMRs, and so I think that's an area where we not only have to take a few more risks, but we have to make sure that a US SMR can be sold in any EU country, and an EU SMR can be sold in any US state, wherever. I think that integration is critical. That's not going to happen without much more deep regulatory alignment. The last thing I'll say on all this is I don't know that the climate in Washington, particularly in the current administration, is all that gung ho about let's cooperate with the Europeans. I don't know if you saw the recent $3.5 billion fine that the EU imposed on Google. That's not a Dale Carnegie strategy of how to win friends and influence people. That's a piss us off strategy. I mean, if you saw President Trump's tweet on that, the president had a whole thing the week before. I mean, don't these people read President Trump's tweets? The week before, he goes straight at the EU for what we've termed non-tariff attacks. Now, I know Brussels will say, oh, it wasn't that and all this stuff. The reality is, whether you think it is or whether it is, and it doesn't really matter, the perception in the US is Europe is not our friend on this stuff anymore. And while I think we need to collaborate intensely, don't get me wrong, we need to collaborate intensely because the threat is not us versus them or us versus you. The threat is China. No question, that's the common enemy. And then on the smaller, and I don't mean to dismiss it, Russia. But the big geopolitical threat is China. I was over there, last point I'll make, I was over there last summer, or last spring, talking to Draghi's chief of staff when they were preparing this report, the Draghi report, great report. Well, actually not so great report. If you read that report carefully, the underlying message is we have to reduce vulnerabilities on key inputs from other countries, including the US. And I was like, you got to be out of your mind. First of all, the US will sell you anything because we want to make money. But secondly, how you can put us in the same category as China. And that thinking has to stop in Europe. And Europe still thinks that we are the threat on technology and not China. And so I'm really hopeful that both sides can work more closely together, including and especially on energy. But I want to point out that there are some barriers there, and some of them are on our side, I get that, but I think some are self-imposed on the Brussels side.
Yeah. Which leads me to exactly what I wanted to ask the group here was the devil's advocate, but you've actually stolen a lot of my thunder here, because I wanted to point out exactly the real world in which we are right now. The fact is that, I mean, and it goes even beyond what you were saying. In fact, the grouchiness in the United States about the Commission, and the grouchiness or worse on the part of the Commission vis-a-vis the United States. And in that kind of environment, all this wonderful, the imperative of cooperation actually becomes a lot less realistic because of domestic political imperatives on this side of the ocean and within Europe. We see how much pressure Ursula von der Leyen is under from even within her own EPP grouping, in terms of being too soft on the Trump administration. And of course, exactly these latest, the approach towards the digital market, the digital space, as well as even large issues is freedom of speech, which doesn't have much to do with this issue, but kind of colors the perceptions. Doesn't really make it that easy to imagine this kind of cooperation, however useful and beneficial it would be to both sides. And then you have the larger question of how to get to how to get the Commission to picking up on Ruslan's point, to sanction the Kremlin on this, the gas, for example, when in fact some of the member states are going to say, like, sort of, no, what don't you understand about no? And they've been saying this now for years, and they have a vote too. And it's not just one country, it's not just two countries, it's actually quite a number of countries. And so where do you apply that? Where would the EU apply the pressure? I mean, there's the Gazprom bank, right? That would be one lever, but how do you all see this? Where are the levers that it can realistically press, and that without having individual member states, block consensus or whatever, veto such steps, however useful they might be in terms of turning the screws and trying to and the help end the war, as well as increase energy security. I don't know who wants to take that, but
well, Matt, it's a really fantastic conversation here, and I'm very honest. One of the things is, I think, as I mentioned, the EU has done a lot in these 5 years, and it has cost a lot politically. Yep. I mean, look at the latest thing in what's happening in France. In Bulgaria, you don't have anymore the clear Euro-Atlantic majority, or there are opportunities for a lot of pro-Russian parties to take over. We've seen this unraveling everywhere. So you've seen the EU has 18 packages of sanctions, and 19 coming up. No one would have thought we would have gone that way, that further. But the fact of life is, the EU doesn't have the teeth. There's certainly a tremendous amount of joint action. In terms of, as Marius mentioned, getting rid of Russian supplies. Germany built LNG terminals that it didn't have within a matter of 12 months. I agree with you, Rob.
Within a couple of months.
Yeah. Lithuania before that was ready. Bulgaria and Greece acted on that. Bulgaria won. I mean, you got to imagine Bulgaria standing up to Russia that has a monopoly on energy in Southeast Europe. They are the largest Bulgarian company, and for all good reasons. This is a state-controlled company already. This is clearly part of Russia's foreign policy now. And they've termed the whole, and yes, China is the bigger rival, but clearly Russia is the much more assertive. There's much more serious, and they've pre-agreed with China apparently what they're going to do, and they're taking on the U.S. They're not interested in taking on Ukraine or Europe. They're taking on the U.S. They want to speak eye to eye with the U.S., which is why China clearly said that. And it's only the U.S. that could actually impose such sanctions, could impose the pain on Gazprom Bank. It's not going to be the EU. The EU could do a lot more in, using the assets. We could do a lot more in certainly in bringing up the infrastructure that is out there. Certainly a lot more in on nuclear, technology. And I'm sure if we go back throughout the years, we've had these agreements. But I think the meetings with on Ukraine have clearly showed that the EU knows U.S. is our best ally, and that we will have to go together on that.
But just what maybe, Minister, the last word. How does it look from the government of Bulgaria's perspective? Sort of this question of are these realistic efforts right now, or how realistic is this within the EU context to expect the EU to do the things that might would be necessary, and also this the prospect of working with the Trump administration on this?
We're working very well with the Trump administration, with my team. For the 8 months I was elected as a minister. That's the 3rd time in 2 weeks we come again with the Prime Minister. 4th time in 8 months. We're working very well with the Energy Department, with the State Department, and we choose our way for independence of the Russian gas, of the Russian oil, and of course we are making a new investments related with this, because Bulgaria is not only responsible for our own energy and gas supply, but we are responsible for the whole region, because on the Bulgarian territory we have 80% of the gas compressors in the whole Balkans, and we really, when I spoke at the beginning that we are the wide open door for the US LNG, for example, that's the truth, because when you look into the LNG terminals in France, as you mentioned at the beginning, they are fully occupied by LNG cargoes from Russia. When you see some LNG terminals in Spain, is the same. But what we are doing, we are delivering LNG, and in our tenders we are mentioning that any LNG is allowed, but Russian LNG is not allowed to reach to the LNG terminals and then to cross to our gas system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this is we should probably stop now with our conversation and turn it open to discussion. So we can spill over beyond 1:30 if there's interest. Does anybody have any comments or questions for the panel? Pavel.
My name is Pavel Burza. I'm from Polish Institute of International Affairs, Washington, D.C. office. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion so far. And I have a question about Three Seas initiative. It's a Baltic, Black Sea, and Adriatic Sea. Last week, President Nawrocki was here in D.C., and it was one of the top 3 topics of the conversation with President Trump. My question for the minister is, what Bulgaria think about this initiative and her role in this initiative? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the questions. From the beginning, we are part of this initiative. On the time I was a deputy minister and I participated in all meetings, we donated the needed millions. I think 10 millions is our share, which we donated at the beginning when the initiative was established. And of course, we proposed projects which to be financed in the Balkan area, which to give us more and more independency. Actually, in Warsaw, in the last 3C initiative, I used the opportunity to meet the colleague Chris Wright and to exchange with him very important points and common projects which we can develop, because I think that Bulgaria reached the point not only to transfer technologies from US to Bulgaria, but also to bring us more investors as possible on the Bulgarian territory.
Mm-hmm. Good. Did I see a hand? Ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Tsipora Fried. I'm a senior visiting fellow at the Hudson Institute and a former senior advisor to the French vice chairman of the Joint Staff. So I just want to ask you if you think that today the European Green Plan on energy and the ambition of decarbonization is totally inadequate considering the geopolitical context and this question of energy security.
Who'd like to take that?
Well, I think again, we proposed a decade ago that the countries come together and create a commitment, not for carbon emissions, which is worthless, nobody bothers, but for a commitment to invest a certain share of your GDP in clean energy innovation, clean energy R&D. So they created that, it's called Mission Innovation. And so we analyzed it from 2015, 2022, we haven't looked at it since. Most European countries, they all committed to doubling their energy R&D. Most of them didn't even come close. There were several countries that actually cut their clean energy R&D. So what does that tell you? It tells you they're not serious. It tells you they're just not serious. They don't want to invest in it. So I think the goal for Europe should be a much, much more focused on clean energy R&D, because the technology, particularly in industry, we wrote a long report on clean hydrogen or green hydrogen. It's, if ever, I mean, there's so much hype on hydrogen. It's just not ready. It's going to cost more money. Aviation fuel will cost more money. And batteries have gotten better, but long duration storage in the utility grid is not good enough. And so I think Europe has gotten ahead of itself. And at one level, it's like, great, thank you for saving the planet. But at a certain level, you have to kind of stay where the technological edge is and not get too far ahead of it. I think that's generally the thing. And so I think the European plan would be good, but I still don't see them making the commitment to really breakthrough innovation that they have to do.
Any more? Sir.
Hi, my name is Jack. I'm a grad student from George Washington University and in international affairs. My question was, how do you, I guess to any of you, how do you see, Europe, Central Asia within Europe's future energy partnerships? Central Asian countries are looking westward nowadays, and Kazakhstan, for example, has a lot of uranium. Turkmenistan with natural gas. So I was wondering. I guess just a general, how is cooperation with Central Asia viewed?
Minister, would you like to take?
Yeah, of course. We have a long-term contract with the Azeri gas supply company, which is delivering about 1/3 from our internal consumption. We have a brilliant communication with the colleagues from Azeri gas supply company, but from the side of delivery, they don't have more capacity. 1 BCM is the maximum they can provide to Bulgaria. And that's why we see the biggest potential for future deliveries coming from US LNG terminals.
Sir. Would you identify yourself, please? Thank you. Yeah.
Now we're in business. Dan Boyse, Pangea Global. We've been trying to do some interesting cross-pollination of investment in Bulgaria. I just think it's fascinating that the U.S. government is leading a nuclear investment or nuclear energy investment roadshow in support of the minister. And I thought it'd be good for you to share how unprecedented this profound action really is, because I think if you want to foster democracy, you got to foster joint capitalism. And so kudos to what Bulgaria is pulling off, and I thought it'd be good for you to share that with the group.
Maybe to start, that in our previous meeting in Washington, we discussed something very interesting, and that was related with the critical materials. We are advancing very well there. Next week, not the week after, we are planning with our Prime Minister to to be in New York and to sign between the Bulgarian Energy Holding, the 100% state-owned financial holding, and the colleagues from the University from North Dakota Memorandum of Understanding, which will give us the opportunity really to explore our lignites, where we are at the moment producing 40% from our electricity, and really to starting something new with the technologies which you are developing on the US territory. Related with the nuclear technologies, once again, we are seeing a huge potential there, because at the moment we are seeing that whole Europe have the second renaissance of construction of new and new reactors. I mentioned already the Polish colleagues, which we are going hand by hand and helping each other for the state aid clearance in front of the European Commission, finding the necessary financing. But the roadshow is even important because keeping this 70% of Bulgarian citizens supportive to the nuclear technologies, we need the good news. We need to explain them what we are planning to do and how we plan to do this, that nuclear energy is safe, that nuclear energy is clean, that nuclear energy is giving the opportunity really for low prices for the household. What at the moment is the case, that in Bulgaria the household prices are 100% regulated by the state, and most of the energy is coming from our current power plant. And for the future, we want also to secure this clean energy for the household.
Okay, sir.
Dr. Stephen Geis, Strafe Management. My question is more of a comment, which is, if we're talking about Central Asian supplies, I think one of the keys that's been missing for a very long time is to have an operating Trans-Caspian pipeline to bring Turkmen gas into the Western market. And I think one of the things that's been holding that back really for 30 years has been the threat of Russia. And I think because of developments in Ukraine, and in particular the inability of Russia to finish the deal, it's emboldened the Turkmen a little bit. But I think there needs to be that Trans-Caspian pipeline to really see Turkmen gas flowing into the energy grid will really bring that Azeri gas up to the levels it's really needed. Thank you.
Actually, we are working very well, as mentioned, with the colleagues from Azerbaijan. You know very well about the Anadolu project, TANAP and TAP, Transatlantic project. The capacity is full. At the moment, the project company going to invest money for increasing the pressure and the capacity of the pipeline, but will be not enough. We started another initiative with the colleagues from Azerbaijan, and that's green cable, one through the deep Black Sea and another through Georgia and Turkey, which will give us the opportunity to bring not only, let's say, gas from the Caspian region, but also, you know, that Baku is known as the city of the wind and fire, and we want to bring this clean wind energy also to the Bulgarian coast.
Okay, we're at the end of sort of the bewitching hours, so we're a bit over time. So unless anybody has any last-minute comments or questions, going once, going twice. Okay, so will you all please join me in a round of applause for our panel?